This YouTube channel is intended for educational and informational purposes only. The content shared on this channel reflects the creator's personal journey of learning about U.S. laws, the Constitution, and related topics. The information presented should not be considered legal advice, nor does it substitute professional legal counsel. While every effort is made to ensure accuracy, laws and legal interpretations may change over time. Viewers are encouraged to conduct their own research and consult a qualified attorney for specific legal concerns. The opinions expressed on this channel are those of the creator and do not necessarily reflect the views of any organization or institution. By watching and engaging with this content, you acknowledge that value freedom is for educational discussion and exploration, and you assume full responsibility for any actions taken based on the information provided.
What is freedom of assembly in the U.S.? Freedom of assembly in the U.S. is the constitutional right of people to gather peacefully for protests, demonstrations, rallies, or other forms of collective expression. It is protected under the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, which guarantees the right to peacefully assemble and petition the government for a redress of grievances. However, this right is subject to some restrictions. The government can impose reasonable time, place, and manner regulations to maintain public order, such as requiring permits for large gatherings or restricting protests in certain locations. Examples include private property or sensitive government buildings. Authorities cannot, however, regulate assemblies based on their content or viewpoint unless there is a clear threat of violence, public danger, or unlawful activity. What is the best way to exercise the freedom to assemble in the U.S. safely? Exercising the freedom of assembly safely in the U.S. requires planning, awareness of the law, and coordination with authorities when necessary. Here are some key steps to ensure a safe and effective gathering. Know your rights. The First Amendment protects your right to assemble peacefully in public spaces like streets, parks, and sidewalks. Private property owners can prohibit gatherings on their property. Police can impose restrictions on time, place, and manner, but cannot discriminate based on the message of the protest. Obtain permits if required. Many cities require permits for large protests, marches, or amplified sound use. Check with local authorities to avoid unnecessary disruptions or arrests. Plan for safety. Choose a designated meeting point in case of separation. Assign legal observers to document police interactions. Have a medical team or first aid plan in case of emergencies. Avoid actions that could be misinterpreted as violence or law-breaking. Communicate clearly. Use encrypted messaging apps like Signal if organizing privately. Have designated spokespersons for media and police communication. Create signage or banners that clearly express your message. Stay aware of law enforcement presence. Officers may try to disperse a protest if they claim it is unlawful. If confronted, remain calm and ask, "Am I free to leave?" If detained, ask for a lawyer and do not consent to a search. Document everything. Record interactions with police for evidence if needed. How should counter-protesters be handled? Handling counter-protesters effectively requires a calm, strategic, and safety-first approach to prevent conflicts while maintaining focus on your assembly. Here's how to manage them. Stay focused and non-confrontational. Ignore provocation. Counter-protesters may try to engage in arguments or disrupt the event. Avoid responding aggressively. Keep the message clear, stay on topic, and don't get sidetracked by their presence. Create a buffer zone. Use volunteers or marshals to form a human barrier between groups. Position speakers and the main crowd away from counter-protesters to reduce direct engagement. Know your rights. Both groups have the right to assemble peacefully. The government cannot shut down your protest just because counter-protesters show up. Law enforcement should keep the peace, but their response varies. Some may take a hands-off approach unless violence occurs. Use de-escalation tactics. If counter-protesters are aggressive, stay calm and do not engage. Designate trained de-escalators to talk to them if necessary. If harassment occurs, document it and report it to authorities. Work with law enforcement, if necessary. Alert police ahead of time if counter-protests are expected. If violence or threats occur, report it immediately. If police intervene, ensure they act fairly and do not suppress one side over the other. Have an exit strategy. Plan safe entry and exit routes to avoid unnecessary confrontations. Encourage participants to leave in groups rather than alone. Would you like advice on a specific type of protest or security concerns? What are some examples of the freedom of assembly being used throughout the history of the U.S. that caused a significant change for the citizens of the U.S.? Throughout U.S. history, the freedom of assembly has played a key role in bringing about significant social and political change. Here are some of the most impactful examples. The Civil Rights Movement, 1950s to 1960s, Montgomery bus boycott, 1955 to 1956. Sparked by Rosa Parks' arrest, this year-long protest led to a Supreme Court ruling that segregated buses were unconstitutional. March on Washington, 1963, over 250,000 people gathered at the Lincoln Memorial, where Martin Luther King Jr. delivered his iconic "I Have a Dream" speech, pressuring Congress to pass civil rights laws. Selma to Montgomery marches, 1965. Peaceful marchers demanding voting rights were brutally attacked by police on Bloody Sunday, leading to national outrage, and the passage of the Voting Rights Act of 1965, the women's suffrage movement, 19th to 20th century. Women's Suffrage March, 1913. Thousands of women marched in Washington, D.C. the day before Woodrow Wilson's inauguration, demanding the right to vote. Silent Sentinels. Protests, 1917. Women picketed outside the White House for months, leading to arrests and forced feedings in jail. Public backlash helped push for the 19th Amendment, 1920, granting women the right to vote. Labor rights movements, late 19th, early 20th century. Haymarket Affair, 1886, a labor protest in Chicago advocating for an 8-hour workday turned violent after a bomb exploded. Though controversial, it strengthened the push for labor rights. The Flint sit-down strike, 1936 to 1937. Workers at General Motors occupied factories, leading to one of the first major victories for labor unions and better working conditions. The anti-Vietnam War movement, 1960s to 1970s. March on the Pentagon, 1967. Tens of thousands protested U.S. involvement in Vietnam. Kent State protests, 1970. After the U.S. invaded Cambodia, protests erupted nationwide. At Kent State University, the National Guard shot and killed 4 students, intensifying opposition to the war and leading to a shift in public opinion. LGBTQ+ rights movements. Stonewall riots, 1969. Protests erupted after police raided the Stonewall Inn, a gay bar in New York City. This is seen as the birth of the modern LGBTQ+ rights movement, eventually leading to pride marches and major legal victories, such as marriage equality. Black Lives Matter protests, 2013 to present. Following the deaths of Trayvon Martin, Michael Brown, George Floyd, and others, millions protested police brutality and systemic racism. These demonstrations led to police reform efforts, policy changes, and increased public awareness of racial injustice. Each of these movements used freedom of assembly to challenge injustice, rally public support, and push for legal and societal change. How did the U.S. government or anti-protesters fight against these events? Throughout U.S. history, the government and anti-protest groups have often attempted to suppress, discredit, or violently oppose movements that exercise the right to assemble. Here's how authorities and opponents reacted to some of the major protests. Civil Rights Movement, 1950s to 1960s. Government and law enforcement response. Police brutality. Peaceful protesters were met with tear gas, batons, fire hoses, and attack dogs, e.g. Birmingham 1963, Selma 1965. COINTELPRO, Counter-Intelligence Program. The FBI, under J. Edgar Hoover, surveilled, infiltrated, and tried to discredit civil rights leaders like Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X. Arrests and harassment. Many activists, including King, were jailed under vague charges like disturbing the peace. anti-protester response. Ku Klux Klan and white supremacist violence. Protesters were attacked and churches were bombed, e.g., the 16th Street Baptist Church bombing in 1963, which killed 4 black girls. Local government resistance. Southern officials like Alabama's Governor George Wallace openly defied desegregation and encouraged law enforcement crackdowns. Women's suffrage movement, 19th to 20th century, government and law enforcement response. Arrests and forced feeding. Suffragists who picketed the White House in 1917, silent sentinels, were arrested, beaten, and force-fed in prison after hunger strikes. Delays in legislation. Politicians tried to stall voting rights legislation for decades. Anti-protester response. Violence and harassment. Suffragists were mocked, attacked, and accused of trying to destroy family values. Labor rights movements, late 19th, early 20th century, government and law enforcement response, militarized crackdowns, the Haymarket Affair, 1886, a peaceful rally for an 8-hour workday ended when police fired into a crowd after a bomb exploded. The Ludlow Massacre, 1914, the Colorado National Guard attacked striking coal miners and their families, killing women and children. Anti-union laws, laws like the Taft-Hartley Act, 1947, restricted union activities. Anti-protester response. Business owners hired strikebreakers. Corporations used private security forces, like the Pinkertons, to violently suppress strikes. Anti-Vietnam War protests, 1960s to 1970s, government and law enforcement response, National Guard shootings. At Kent State, 1970, the National Guard fired into a crowd, killing 4 students. A similar incident occurred at Jackson State University. FBI surveillance. Activists, including John Lennon, were monitored under COINTELPRO. Police brutality and arrests. Protesters in Washington, D.C. and Chicago faced violent police crackdowns. Anti-protester response. Pro-war. Counter-protests. Groups like the Hard Hat Riot, construction workers in NYC, attacked anti-war demonstrators. Stonewall and LGBTQ+ rights movement, 1969 to present, government and law enforcement response. Police raids, the Stonewall riots, 1969, began after police raided the Stonewall Inn, a gay bar, arresting and beating patrons. Legislation against LGBTQ+ rights. The Defense of Marriage Act, 1996, banned federal recognition of same-sex marriage, later overturned. Don't Ask, Don't Tell, 1993, forced LGBTQ+ service members to stay closeted in the military. Anti-protester response. Religious and conservative groups. Organizations fought against LGBTQ+ rights, often using political lobbying. Black Lives Matter protests, 2013 to present, government and law enforcement response, militarized police response, protesters in Ferguson, 2014, and across the U.S. faced tear gas, rubber bullets, and curfews. Surveillance and infiltration. The FBI labeled some BLM activists as Black Identity Extremists. Legislation against protests. States passed anti-protest laws, increasing penalties for blocking roads or resisting arrest. Anti-protester response. Armed counter-protesters, groups like the Proud Boys, and armed militias confronted protesters. Disinformation campaigns. Social media was used to spread false claims to discredit BLM. Conclusion. While the freedom of assembly has driven major societal changes, it has almost always been met with resistance through law enforcement crackdowns, surveillance, legal restrictions, and violence from opposition groups. However, despite these obstacles, protest movements have still led to meaningful reforms.